Hey everybody, I hope everyone is having a good day, um, good night, whatever time it is for you. I really liked working on my last Game of Thrones video, well, Song of Ice and Fire universe video, the Game of Thrones universe video. So I want to make a house that I've always been super interested in, mainly because of the feud between the Blackwoods and the Brackens, and seeing a Bracken in the Night of the Seven Kingdoms like really gave me a lot of, I guess, push and drive to maybe make a video like this. And I also appreciate YouTubers like Quinn the GM who love John Connington and have a weird, almost weird, specific, not obsession with him, but you know, he does truly cite why he likes these characters. But yeah, to begin, so yeah, House Bracken, the history of Stonehenge, the Red Stallion, and the feud that will literally never die ever. And in this, yeah, I know that the Brackens are not the biggest name in Game of Thrones history, but that's what makes them interesting to me. They're one of those Riverland houses that keep showing up when the story gets messy. They have old blood, an old castle, a proud sigil, and a rivalry with House Blackwood that feels like it has been going on for forever. And I mean that, quite literally. My main point is simple, and it's simple for everybody reading this. And I'm sorry I'm taking notes like a school grader making these videos. I will get better. Um, but House these two houses, their feud is so legendary and it feels like so for forever. Um, and if you understand or know anything, anything about House Bracken at all, you know that why the Riverlands are always caught kind of in the middle of every war, and also why the Riverlands are so important. But yeah, so let's so yeah, I'm gonna break down the story with kind of who the Brackens are, why the Blackwood feud matters, what they did during the Dance and Blackfire era, how the War on the Five Kings hurts them, and then kind of my final take, my final read on their legacy. But I'm breaking down their story with, um, you know, I just don't want to throw names and dates at you guys. I want the story to move, you know, as the bigger to look kind of at the bigger pictures of the story. Um, but yeah, this is kind of the pacing of it. But yeah, House Bracken is based at Stonehenge in the Riverlands. Their arms are red and a red stallion on a gold shield set on brown, and their lance sit around a red fork on a trident. As I said earlier, to me, that already tells you guys the vibe. They're old, they're stubborn, they're proud, and these ancient dudes are literally built for war. Um, but yeah, they've been around for forever, and they're simply not going anywhere. But yeah, House Bracken comes from the Stonehenge in the Riverlands, which um, you know just from them being there makes them proud. They're ready to argue over any of their land, their blood, or their honor. And their lands are around the Red Fork of the Trident, which matters because the Riverlands are basically the crossroads of Westeros. Armies keep marching through this region, and houses like Bracken get dragged into almost every single major conflict that has happened in Game of Thrones history. They are sworn under the Tullys during the main story of Game of Thrones, but the lore makes it clear they have old power and can field a serious army for quite literally anybody. Um, but yeah, the Brackens go way back. Before they were bannermen, the Brackens claimed to be kings. The oldest part of House Bracken history is what makes their pride make sense. They are not presented as a house that just rose under the Targaryens or only mattered because of the Tullys. The Brackens have first men blood, and in the Age of Heroes, they are remembered as kings of the Riverlands. That changes the way that I think everybody should look at them, especially how I look at them. If a family believes its ancestors ruled the river, then every later insult feels bigger. Every border dispute feels like a reminder that they used to be more powerful. So, in my opinion, this is the heart of their whole personality as a house. They're not just trying to gain land, they're trying to prove that they were important first and prove that they're important again. But yeah, their pride makes more sense when you remember that they lost a crown. Um, and I think that also can add a little bit of, that energy to the feud of the Blackwoods and the Brackens. So yeah, here comes the feud. Um, the Bracken and the Blackwood feud is one of the best rivalries I think in the lore because neither side just says we hate them. Both sides have a whole origin story that makes them look right. From the Bracken's point of view, they were the kings along the Red Fork, and the Blackwoods were vessels who betrayed them. From the Blackwood point of view, the Brackens were not rightful kings at all. They were petty lords and the horse breeders who hired swords and took what was not theirs. That is what makes this conflict so good. And it is not about just that, and it is not about just the land, it's about the memory, and it is about the whole version of history coming to light and coming to the truth of everything. But both sides tell the story like the other side stole history from them. Um, and yeah, there's just literally going to be for forever. And I love that. And if you watch the recent episode of House of Dragons season 3 episode 2, when they're singing like "Feed the Fish," the Blackwoods and the Brackens are actually celebrating and together and dancing and whatnot. So there are people that are, there's controversy fans behind that, which is funny. Um, but yeah, faith in the old gods. The next thing I would point out is that the feud is not only political, religion becomes a part of it too. The Brackens and Blackwoods actually fought together against the Andals, which is ironic because they could unite when they have a common enemy, and they have before, and they do it again. Maybe not before, I'm being stupid, but they'll do it again. And but after the Andal victory, the split deepened. The Brackens converted to the faith of the Seven, while the Blackwoods kept worshipping the old gods. And you get the accusation that the Brackens poisoned the Blackwood weirwood at Raventree Hall. Sorry. Whether that is true or not almost does not matter for the rivalry. The story itself becomes part of hatred. Once religion, land, and family pride are all involved, peace will not exist, and peace won't last either. Um, but yeah, the Brackens, they can work together when they super duper feel like it, when the kingdom needs it, but most of the time, um, they do not need it. But yeah, kings come and go, but the Brackens will always stay messy. So House Hor, Targaryen, and Tully featured here. Hors and Targaryens. Um, kings come and go, but the Brackens will always stay messy. When the story moves into the Targaryen era, House Bracken is still important, but they do not get the biggest prize. During Aegon's conquest, the Brackens aided the Targaryens and rebelled against Harren the Black. The Blackwoods also. I've been reading the beginning of Fire and Blood. Sorry, and it is so good. It's amazing. But I'm past that point, but the beginning of that just took me so off course, and I loved it. Um, but the Blackwoods also aided the Targaryens, but because the Brackens and Blackwoods who are had already been weakened by another private war, Aegon did not make either of them the new Lord Paramount of the Trident. He gave that title to House Tully, and to me that is a huge turning point. The Brackens had older blood and old pride, but the new political order put them under the Tullys. That probably did not make the Brackens any less bitter. And I want to talk about that a little bit more. I think that that will always be a reason and a motivation for why the Brackens will always stay messy because they want their power back. They believe that once they were kings, and now they're just They they work under the Tullys, and I really wish, like on live action, we could have some more deep cuts of some of these houses' opinions and whatnot. But yeah, the Dance of Dragons, the Burning Mill, during the Dance of Dragons, and also, spoilers. Yeah, spoilers. I apologize. But during the Dance of Dragons, the Brackens back Aegon the Second and the Greens. The Blackwoods back Rhaenyra and the Blacks. The Burning Mill, Amos Bracken kills Samwell Blackwood. Then Amos is killed by an arrow said to come from Ilysane Blackwood. So, that's kind of the classic Bracken Blackwood era. Even a Targaryen civil war turns into their own little private war. But the Dance of Dragons is where the feud becomes part of a massive civil war. If you guys haven't seen it, if you don't care, this isn't really spoiling that much. If you if you care about Ilysane Blackwood dying, but the Dance of Dragons is where the feud becomes part of a massive civil war. Bracken declares for Aegon second again in the Greens. Well, just repeating it again. Um, but I like this part because it sums up the whole rivalry. The realm is literally tearing itself apart over two houses with ginormous dragons, and people are coming up to different, Aemond or Daemon are going to Harrenhal and going, hey, let us use this land. Let me take this land, and both are, didn't work out the best for Strong, but in a way, they don't really care what side they're on. They just care if they have a dragon to help them. And I think for the Brackens and the Blackwoods, they're one of the few houses that truly hate each other so much that they needed to be on opposite sides. But yeah, Aegon the Fourth brings Brackens back into royal scandal. So Aegon the Fourth is Egg, which I think is super, super cool. The Aegon Fourth era is where the Brackens move from local Riverland drama into a royal scandal. Barbara Bracken becomes the fifth mistress of, I mean, not Egg from Night of the Seven Kings. I'm sorry. This is Egg, the one with he legitimizes all the bastards and whatnot. But yeah, the Aegon, my bad. The Aegon four the Aegon Four era is where the Brackens move from local Riverland drama into royal scandal. Barbara Bracken becomes the fifth mistress of Aegon the Fourth. She is the mother of Aegor Rivers, who later becomes known as Bittersteel. That alone makes House Bracken important because Bittersteel has a massive impact on later said history. But the Bracken family also overplays its hand. Lord Bracken starts talking about marrying Barbara to Aegon after Queen Nerys nearly dies in childbirth. That is where the court turns against them. In my view, this shows the upside and downside of House Bracken. They are ambitious enough to get close to the throne, but that same ambition will get them punished. So, you know, I think that's Bittersteel is a huge part of like the Blackfire Civil War, like Blackfire's coming into Westeros, all of that, super, being obsessed. I think that obsessive personality from the from Aegon, you know, goes right into Aegor, which is pretty cool to see. But yeah, Bittersteel is the great bastard. Bittersteel is probably the most important Bracken connected figures, probably the most Bracken important connected figure in the entire lore. Aegor Rivers is the son of Barbara Bracken and Aegon IV, so he carries Bracken and Targaryen blood. But what really defies him is that he has so much resentment. He's remembered as being so easily offended, and some of the lore connect that to his Bracken ancestry. He becomes one of the major supporters of Daemon Blackfire and the Blackfire cause. So when I think about House Bracken, I do not think about the Stonehenge or the Blackwood feud. I think about how Black Bracken blood feels into, being into one of the biggest long term houses, ever. And Bittersteel makes the Bracken legacy bigger, darker, and more dangerous, putting, good and bad PR on it. Mostly, mostly bad. Um, yeah. After Bittersteel in the feud keeps finding ways to come back. One example is Sir Otho Bracken, known as the Brood of Bracken, who kills Lord Quentin Blackwood at a tourney in King's Landing. That kind of event is exactly why the feud will really never end. You can have marriages between the families, and you can have peace that lasts for years. But one violent moment will reopen everything. And to me, that is what makes this rivalry feel super realistic in the world of Westeros. And it is not just two houses being petty, because there are many like that. And it is generations of people inheriting old anger and then adding new reasons to hate each other. Um, which, you know, we need that. We need that feud. Um, I've said like 100 million times. I'm sorry. But now we're kind of going to the main story of Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones. But the War on the Five Kings wrecks the Bracken lands. By the time by the time a Song of Ice and Fire story, House Bracken is still proud, but the War of the Five Kings hits them hard. Gregor Clegane burns through Bracken lands, ruins their fields, kills the small folk, and leaves Stonehenge as a smoking ruin. That is one of the things I would emphasize, the most in this video, is that the Brackens have such ancient history, but when war comes and all that old pride, did not protect their people living under them. Jonas Bracken later retakes Stonehenge, but the damage is already done, and in my opinion, this is where the Bracken story becomes very Riverland. The the nobles fight over honor and banners, but the countryside gets destroyed over and over again. Um, but yeah, when the Lannister War hits the Riverlands, Gregor Clegane is the woat. But yeah, Jonas, I think he is probably my favorite Bracken. But Jonas Bracken is, he's loyal. He's the current face of the house in the main books. And I think he's super interesting because he's not simple. He is counted as, Host Tully, Huster Tully's loyal bannerman. And after the Battle of Camps, he joins the other River Lords in declaring Robb Stark King of the North, which is super cool. He's there. But after the Red Wedding, he surrenders to the Iron Throne and then receives a royal pardon. I mean, what was he supposed to do? Come on, get your whole family killed? Nah. Then the Brackens fight the Blackwoods, who remain loyal to the Stark cause. Um, but I do not read Jonas as a villain, and I don't read him as a hero either. I just see him as a lord trying to survive the war, and just trying to play his cards right because he's caught in the middle of something as a more minor house. Um, but yeah, my final read on House Bracken is they're not the clean hero house. They're proud, they're aggressive, and they're usually caught up in grudges. But I wouldn't necessarily call them a villain at all either. But I think that's why they're perfect for the Riverlands. And they're a great Crusader King 3. If you ever want to try to, get them on get them the Lords of the Riverlands or whatnot, that's super fun. But yeah, the Red Stallion is basically the symbol of a house that keeps losing ground, but literally will never lose their pride, and they won't ever. But the land is beautiful, and it will always be fought over. Old kings become bannermen, old rivals become neighbors, and marriages create peace, and then the next generation will throw that away. So no matter what happens between Bracken and the Blackwoods, the rest of the time, I know that they will always be angry at each other, but just my citations and whatnot made sure to, not use any AI generated photos or anything like that. But I hope you guys have a great day, great night, whenever. But take care, guys, and have a good one. And if you liked the video and you liked House Bracken or your House Blackwood or Game of Thrones at all, leave a like, subscribe. Thank you, guys.